There is a silent, mysterious, and profoundly transformative force that lives within every woman. It doesn't shout, demand, or impose itself. It simply is. This subtle, enveloping, almost hypnotic energy transcends aesthetic standards and social norms, operating on levels of the unconscious that the rational mind cannot comprehend. When a woman fully embodies this authentic feminine vibration, something inside a man is stirred, without him being able to explain why. He feels it, he responds, he connects, as if something ancient and sacred has awakened within him. In this video, we'll dive into the deepest layers of the feminine psyche, guided by the teachings of Carl Jung, to understand how this energy can attract, transform, and make him surrender without even knowing the reason. If this theme resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose to live my feminine essence with power and authenticity." Analytical psychology, as developed by Carl Jung, offers us a profound map for understanding feminine energy, not as a stereotype or social role, but as an essential archetype of the human psyche. In Jungian theory, this energy is chiefly represented by the anima archetype, which resides in the male unconscious, and by the quest to integrate both feminine and masculine aspects within each individual. When a woman accesses and expresses her true feminine essence, intuitive, receptive, nurturing, mysterious, and connected to the unconscious, she unconsciously triggers the anima in a man. This sets off a deep inner movement in him that he often cannot name, but feels intensely. This activation doesn't come from appearance or effort, but from the authenticity with which a woman lives her wholeness. Jung called this process individuation, the path toward integrating opposites within oneself. As a woman walks this path, she brings together not only her strength and independence, the inner masculine principle, but also her vulnerability, sensitivity, and intuition, the inner feminine principle. This internal harmony resonates outwardly and awakens in others a magnetic response, as though something in them is invited to transform as well. Projection, another central Jungian concept, also plays its part here. A man projects onto this woman unconscious aspects of his own soul that he longs to find. By recognizing in her something he seeks unconsciously, he feels an inexplicable attraction. It isn't just desire, it's a call of the soul. Conscious feminine energy does not manipulate or seduce artificially. It simply is, and in that simply being, it becomes irresistible. Archetypal feminine energy is not a cultural invention, a media trend, or a set of learned behaviors. It is a deep force rooted in the collective unconscious that Jung identified as fundamental to the human psyche. This energy transcends gender and is present in everyone, but it manifests with special potency in a woman who connects with her most primal and symbolic essence. It embodies the principles of receptivity, intuition, creativity, and connection with nature's cycles and the unconscious. It complements the masculine archetype, which stands for reason, action, focus, and structure. A woman who lives from this vibration activates a symbolic field that speaks directly to the male unconscious. When a woman embodies her archetypal feminine energy, she becomes more than a presence. She becomes a mirror of the man's own unconscious. Jung called this inner image the anima. It represents everything the man has yet to integrate in himself: his sensitivity, intuition, capacity to feel, creativity, and relational dimension. Encountering a woman who authentically expresses this vibration, he experiences her as if she were a fragment of his own soul. This experience is not rational. He doesn't understand it with his mind, but his body and psyche respond. He feels it. A woman, for her part, doesn't need conscious effort to awaken this sensation. It isn't about technique, strategy, or emotional manipulation. On the contrary, any attempt to force this state breaks the subtle field of authenticity that sustains this energy. It is precisely natural surrender, trust in one's own intuition, and sensitive presence that create this magnetism. This woman doesn't try to prove anything, doesn't compete, and doesn't seek approval. She is simply so whole within herself that her presence communicates something sacred, ancestral, and deeply feminine. Archetypal feminine energy also carries mystery. Jung asserted that archetypes have a numinous quality, that is, they awaken a feeling of reverence, as if we are in the presence of something divine. A woman who embodies this energy is not predictable, does not fit superficial molds, and is not fully comprehensible. She holds a degree of mystery that doesn't repel but invites. She is like the moon, cyclical, full of nuances, sometimes illuminated, sometimes shadowed, but always present, influential, and attuned to life's natural rhythms. This evokes in a man a sense of fascination. He feels called, almost as if guided by something beyond physical attraction. It is the energy of the deep psyche at work. Such a woman awakens in him the need to delve deeper, to listen more, to look beyond the surface. By not appearing needy or performative, she activates in him the desire to explore, to discover, to know more, not only about her, but about himself. And that is where the Jungian magic happens. The woman becomes a channel through which the man connects with his own soul. The process of individuation, in this case, appears as an invitation. He doesn't consciously understand it, but something within him begins to stir. He doesn't fall for her in the usual sense. He is drawn by a symbolic field, by an inner image she evokes. Archetypal feminine energy, therefore, is not only a magnetic force, it is also a portal. When a woman lives in contact with this essence, she not only attracts, she heals, transforms, and reveals, not with words but with presence, not with promises but with vibration, not with control but with trust in the flow of life and the soul. Authentic feminine energy, with all its power and depth, often remains hidden in the deepest layers of a woman's psyche. This happens because from an early age, society imposes norms, expectations, and standards that suppress this essence. A woman is taught to be useful, pleasant, efficient, competitive, and productive, molding herself to fit a model that values traits traditionally associated with the masculine. In this process, essential parts of the feminine psyche are banished to the unconscious, giving rise to what Jung called the shadow, all that was rejected, denied, or repressed during the formation of the conscious identity. A woman's shadow holds both her anger and pain that have been suppressed, as well as her stifled intuition, silenced sensuality, and undervalued vulnerability. It doesn't only contain negative aspects, as commonly believed. The shadow also shelters talents, strengths, and natural gifts that couldn't be lived because they didn't fit external expectations. A woman who seeks to reconnect with her true femininity must necessarily traverse her shadow. This means confronting her fears, resentments, self-sabotaging patterns, and the masks she adopted to survive in a world that often does not welcome her emotional depth or cyclical nature. Jung maintained that there is no illumination without confronting one's own darkness. In a woman's case, that darkness is populated by internal voices telling her she mustn't feel too much, mustn't be vulnerable, mustn't trust her own intuition, mustn't allow herself to rest or flow. She learns that she must control, dominate, compete, and conquer. Thus, her soul disconnects from the archetypal feminine and identifies instead with an ego shaped by the need for external approval. In that state, a woman may pursue being desired, admired, or successful, but she feels empty, fragmented, and cut off from something essential. Engaging with the feminine shadow is painful but profoundly liberating. When a woman begins to recognize and welcome the parts of herself that were denied, she starts the process of reclaiming her soul. She realizes that her sensitivity is not weakness, but perceptive strength, that her vulnerability is a bridge to genuine connection, that her anger is not something to hide but a signal of where she's being disrespected, and that her intuition is a legitimate and powerful compass. As she integrates these aspects, she radiates an energy that cannot be fabricated, the authenticity of being. Unchecked repression of authentic femininity leads many women into unbalanced relationships where they try to control, please, or over-adapt. Such distorted energy creates tension, anxiety, and a constant sense of inadequacy. On the other hand, when the shadow is embraced, a woman becomes whole. She no longer needs to play a role. Her presence communicates security, depth, and freedom. And that wholeness reverberates in others, especially in men, as something almost hypnotic. He senses that she doesn't need him to be complete, and precisely because of that, he feels drawn to something real, not to a projection of desire or neediness. A woman who embraces her shadow reconnects with her psychic roots and with the archetypal feminine within her. This reconnection makes her less reactive, less insecure, and less dependent on external validation. She begins to live from a solid inner center that is not egoic but archetypal. The energy she radiates comes from a deep place, not from a need to be seen, but from the certainty of who she is. And this vibration, which cannot be simulated, is felt by others as something enigmatic and irresistible. Shadow integration is therefore an indispensable stage on the path of those who wish to live feminine wholeness. There is no true light without passing through darkness. A woman who undertakes this journey emerges with her own unique glow, not dependent on applause but reflecting the silent, healing strength of someone who has met her own soul. According to Carl Jung, individuation is the process through which an individual becomes what they truly are, by integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. For a woman, this journey is deeply marked by the challenge of balancing her inner strength with emotional surrender, two seemingly opposing expressions that, when harmonized, reveal the full power of the feminine. For centuries, Western culture demanded a choice. A woman must be either strong, independent, and rational, suppressing her sensitivity, or emotional, nurturing, and dependent, abandoning her autonomy. Feminine individuation breaks this dilemma, proposing an inner reconciliation of opposites. A woman walking toward individuation learns to recognize her strength not as rigidity, but as an inner center. This strength arises from deep listening to herself, respecting her own boundaries, and making decisions guided by intuition and reason in harmony. Her power does not seek domination, but presence. She asserts herself not through confrontation, but through clarity. At the same time, she does not fear emotional surrender. She understands that feeling deeply is not a sign of weakness, but of connection to the soul. Her openness is not submission, but a conscious act of trust and authenticity. This integration becomes possible when a woman stops identifying solely with external images of success, beauty, or approval, and instead builds an intimate relationship with her inner world. Individuation demands silence, listening, and the courage to endure the solitude necessary for self-knowledge. A woman must look within and find not only her lights, but also her shadows, her pains, her deepest desires, and her contradictions. She sees herself whole, and in that recognition, true transformation begins. When a woman connects with her totality, she starts to act from a more authentic place. Her relationships change, not because she demands more, but because her vibration no longer supports what is superficial or unbalanced. She no longer needs to plead for attention, for her presence is magnetic. She avoids power games because her strength isn't based on control. Her emotional openness becomes a conscious choice, not a consequence of need. And it is this balance that enables feminine energy to touch another on an unconscious level. In a man, this vibration activates the anima archetype, the inner image of the feminine that resides in his depths. A woman living in a state of individuation resonates intensely with that inner image, not because she looks like it on the outside, but because she embodies its essence. A man senses, often without understanding, that he is facing something rare and genuine. He isn't attracted by looks or behavior, but by the feeling that she invites him to become more whole, more authentic, more connected to his own depth. Such a woman doesn't need to hide her strength to be loved, nor must she suppress her sensitivity to be respected. She inhabits an inner place where both coexist like sun and moon in harmony. This makes her unpredictable, mysterious, and profoundly human. A man who encounters this vibration feels both challenged and held. He doesn't know why, but something within him moves, surrenders, and opens. Feminine individuation, then, is neither linear nor simple. It demands inner ruptures, the courage to relinquish learned roles, and the willingness to feel and traverse zones of discomfort. But it is precisely on this path that a woman finds her true voice. Not the voice that pleases, but the one that reveals. Not the one that persuades, but the one that expresses. It is this voice, whether silent or expressive, that communicates her truth and builds a bridge between her soul and another's. In Jungian analytical psychology, the anima represents the feminine archetype in a man's unconscious. She is more than an idealized image of a woman. She is the symbolic embodiment of all that is sensitive, intuitive, receptive, and creative within the masculine psyche. Jung asserted that throughout life, a man needs to integrate this inner figure to achieve wholeness. Interestingly, This process is often triggered by a woman who unknowingly activates that archetypal dimension in him simply by being in touch with her own feminine essence. She doesn't represent the man's anima, but by living in an archetypally true state, she awakens in him a resonance he recognizes, albeit unconsciously, as part of his soul. This woman does not act to seduce, nor does she strive for perfection. What sets her apart is the authenticity with which she inhabits her interiority. She feels deeply, observes the world with gentleness, speaks from the soul and acts with presence. Her emotions are alive but not uncontrolled. Her intuition guides her steps without disconnecting from reality. By living in integration, she reveals to a man a possibility he never knew, to be whole, sensitive and true without losing his strength. This invitation is neither verbal nor intellectual, it is symbolic and emotional. Through her presence, she invites him to touch a part of himself he may have repressed out of fear, shame or conditioning. When a man encounters this woman, he senses something he cannot name. It is not mere admiration, nor is it solely physical attraction. It is as if his soul is touched by an ancient archetypal vibration, calling him to remember who he is beyond social masks. The encounter stirs in him a deep longing for closeness, but also discomfort, because she leads him to feel. And feeling for many men was taught to be dangerous or undesirable, yet this woman, demanding nothing, guides him to an inner place he never knew existed. She doesn't aim to fix him, save him, or position herself as his guide. Her own journey of individuation has taught her that one cannot walk another's path, but by living her anima in its truest expression, she becomes mirror and symbol. When a man sees her, he sees also what is missing within himself. That realization awakens an unconscious yearning, a desire to reunite. It's as if she evokes an ancestral longing for integration, unity, and symbolic fusion with something greater than the ego. This process isn't always gentle. Activating the anima can surface a man's fears, resistances, projections, and insecurities. He may idealize her, put her on a pedestal, and expect her to resolve his inner conflicts. But a woman who knows her own psyche does not allow herself to be trapped by that image. She remains true to her authenticity, enabling the man, little by little, to discover that what he sought in her actually resides within himself. True alchemy happens when she continues being herself without trying to match his projections. In that moment, the man is unconsciously and symbolically invited to begin his own individuation process. Awakening the masculine soul through contact with conscious femininity is not a romantic enchantment, but a profound call to integration. A man starts to perceive that life holds more than achievements, logic, and control. He learns to value listening, silence, genuine connection, and deep feeling. He comes into contact with vulnerability not as weakness, but as a bridge to his own soul. And this transforms his relationships, his way of loving, and his presence in the world. A woman who lives her anima in fullness is therefore a catalyst for transformation, not by force or intention, but by presence. Her truth vibrates in silence, and that silence speaks louder than words. By remaining faithful to herself, she illuminates inner paths in others. A man who encounters her may, if ready, begin his own journey back to essence, not because she led him, but because she inspired him. Throughout this journey, we have explored the deepest layers of the feminine psyche, guided by the principles of Carl Jung's analytical psychology. We have seen that true feminine energy lies not in appearance or performance, but in the courage to inhabit one's essence authentically. A woman who embraces her shadow, walks toward individuation, and lives her anima in plenitude not only transforms herself, she awakens another's soul, often without a single word. This subtle, silent, and genuine magnetism arises from integration, not idealization. It is this whole woman, who needs no validation, who touches the male unconscious so powerfully. He feels it, but doesn't know why. And in that mysterious space between feeling and understanding, a transformation begins that transcends reason. If this message spoke to your soul, subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery and transformation. And be sure to watch the next video on your screen. It will deepen this connection between soul, love, and essence even further. Your path begins when you choose to live in truth. The rest, life will handle.